for a mom, first and foremost, that it's okay to cry. I know
Mhm,
that a lot of us
mhm,
might know that, some people, know that, but
mhm.
that it's okay for you to cry.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to cry in front of your children. It's actually healthy and models for them that it's okay to cry
Yeah.
when they are crying, especially about a grief. Uh, it's important to say the words, it's okay to cry.
Hello and welcome to the Mommy Consultant. This is a space that empowers superhero working moms to put their wellness needs first so they can pass down a generation of wellness. Please make sure you subscribe to us and especially only to tune into this amazing conversation that we're going to have today on mommy wellness. So, our guest today is Dr. Monica Page. She is a licensed psychologist, children's book author, children's yoga instructor in Northern Virginia. She conducts community education workshops on positive racial identity development, LGBTQIA allyship, social justice advocacy, and parent education. I am so excited for this conversation today. So, we're going to welcome Dr. Monica.
Hello.
Hello. The first thing I always loved saying is like how I met whoever's the guest on here. So I love that I met you on a hurricane.
That's right.
I met you in a hurricane through a mutual friend of ours. But I always say that when I meet someone, I usually kind of get a vibe from that person. And I always love just your vibe was very memorable.
Oh,
And I love meeting other clinicians of color because I think we are needed in
yeah.
this world.
Mhm.
And so I just love that you are, I'm able to have this conversation with you, especially about your book.
Oh,
So I'm so excited for this. So yeah, so how are you doing today first?
today I am good. It's sunny here in Northern Virginia. So we've had a couple of rainy weekends. So this is great. And yeah, so I'm good here. I'm just working from home and I have my two dogs at home. So if we hear anything, that's
Same here. Same here.
probably
I've had the lawnmower going, the dogs like barking, but that's mommy life. Like we're
it.
both moms,
It
so
is. It is. There's always something. Like even getting a space for our conversation. I was like, wait, let me make sure there's nothing in the background.
right.
It's
I know.
toys, clothes. Yeah.
I know. It's fine. It's fine. That's how we are here. I mean, we've had situations where people have gotten like phone calls about their kids, like in the middle of the
Wow.
conversation. But that's real life.
That
That's
is
real life. And
it.
that's what we're here to talk about.
Yes.
We're here to talk about that this is real life as a mom and the difficult things that we go through. So
Absolutely.
well, let's start with I like to start with a visualization exercise just to get us kind of, in the mode of just talking about wellness. So, what I want you to do is just put your hand on your heart or
Mhm.
anywhere that you feel like you want to just kind of ground yourself, and you can feel free to close your eyes or focus somewhere else. And so we're just going to take a deep breath in and a breath out. Again, deep breath in and breath out. And just have your breath back at a normal pace. And I want you to just kind of create a picture in your mind. I'm going to say the word wellness. And I want you to just create a picture in your mind of whatever that means to you. As you breathe in and out, just notice just when I say the word wellness, what comes in your mind. we're going to take another deep breath in and out. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Oh.
Well, what came up for you during that time?
So many things, but ultimately it was the word and the idea of balance. Just I saw so many kind of bubbles that represent areas of my life just floating around
Mhm.
and me in the middle just trying to balance all of those various aspects of my life.
Yes, yes. I agree with you, like the word balance, and I think it's so hard as a mom,
Hmm.
and a mom that works. I mean, you are
Right.
a licensed psychologist
Hmm.
and you just wrote a children's book.
Yes.
And so I think when you think about balance, how is it for you even, I don't know, how did this idea come up of writing a book?
Yes. Well, actually, I have been wanting to write a book, a children's book specifically, probably for 25 years since I started my journey initially as an educator. So I was actually a kindergarten teacher before I was a psychologist. And my experience as a kindergarten teacher led me to the world of psychology because I was in my classroom, I was overwhelmed. I worked in a large urban district. So we didn't have a lot of resources, but we had a lot of kids and a lot of needs. And it was there in my classroom where I was like, I want to do something where I can work with children on a more individual basis, also on a more kind of global basis in terms of being able to help a large number of children at one time. And so I headed into psychology so that I could be part of the theory makers, right? The people who
Mhm,
create the theories that oftentimes educators abide by. So
mhm,
that was my goal. I was like, okay, after, teaching kindergarten, I headed into actually school counseling master's degree, and then from there into my psychology PhD. But that whole time, my basis has been children's education and understanding how children process difficult topics. Um, Other topics that I have addressed in the classroom and will address in this book series
mhm,
is positive racial identity development for Black children. And that was huge. And that was something that I saw a great need for in my classroom as a teacher. And then I've just seen it in all settings of my matriculation through my PhD, through my
mhm.
internship, and now as a psychologist. Such important topics that oftentimes parents know are important, but they don't know how to address, right?
Yep,
So I
yep.
was like, you know what? I need to write a book about these things. And so I always had it in my mind to do it. And then I sat down, probably it was the beginning of 2022. And I was like, I'm going to write this children's book because my two daughters were giving me so much material, like I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, this happened and I can make that into a story and this happened. And then as I was writing that first book,
Yeah.
our dog passed away suddenly, and it was traumatic for the girls. It was
Mhm.
traumatic for me as well. That's my first child, was my
Yeah.
first fur baby. And so I had to model what I've told my clients, right? That writing is therapeutic. It really is. And it was therapeutic for my girls, it was therapeutic for me. And now they have this beautiful book that's a tribute to their first sister Bella. So my first book will actually be my second, and
Yeah.
this became the first book. And so I hadn't intended on talking about grief,
Okay.
but seeing my children experience it and seeing how we processed it and some of the coping activities that we did in our household, I was like, this is important to share. So not only did it help us in our grief process, but we hope that it helps other kids.
Oh, I love this. And I think people don't realize about taking your experience every day as a mom and the things that we go through, and then really teaching and informing other people.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you're familiar with the wellness wheel. Like, so we talk a lot about that for the mommy consultant. We talk about the wellness wheel, and there's an area on there that is like really intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
So learning more, learning about wellness. And I'm hearing just from you is that you really have so many like skills and things that like education
Mm-hmm.
wise. And you're combining that with like your experience as a mom, experience with grief. And so it's like, what would be the number one thing that if you had a mom in front of you, right now, what's the number one thing you would inform her or tell her, in that moment? Maybe they're dealing with grief, they're dealing
Right.
with things with their child. What's
Yeah.
the number one thing that you would tell that mom?
For a mom, first and foremost, that it's okay to cry. I know that a lot of us
Mhm,
might know that, some people, know that, but
mhm,
that it's okay for you to cry.
yeah,
It's okay for you to cry in front of your children. It's actually healthy and models for them that it's okay to cry
yeah,
when they are crying, especially about a grief. Uh, it's important to say the words, it's okay to cry.
yeah, yep,
It's okay to cry.
yep,
Um, Oftentimes, and I'll see it on TV shows, like uh, oftentimes like reality TV shows where people
mhm,
are trying to support or comfort their friend, and they'll
yeah.
say, "Oh, don't cry, don't
Woo!
cry," and yeah, and I want to jump through the
You wanna
screen
be
and
like,
and say,
"Ah!"
"No, no, 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 no." One of the most
Yeah,
valuable things to say to someone who is experiencing grief of any kind is to say, "It's okay to cry,"
yeah.
you know. And I'm here for you, and I might cry too, giving just that simple statement of allowing someone to cry or to not cry, to vent or to not vent, right?
I love this conversation
Mhm.
around letting someone that have that opportunity to just cry and being that friend for them, being that person
Yes,
next to them, especially I think for women of color. I think
absolutely.
that we don't have that opportunity to be able to give that space. So,
Hmm.
what do you think is the reason why there's this resistance for people to let their friend or their family member or even sometimes your child let them just cry and have that moment?
Well, the reality is that oftentimes people will say things like, "Oh, don't cry," or just say blanket statements like "it'll be okay," which isn't horrible. They say those things because they don't know how to deal with what
Okay.
you're experiencing.
Yep.
And so they're afraid, right? If they say it's okay to cry, what does that mean? Are they going to keep crying, for,
Mhm.
how long? And what do I do with that? And the important thing to know is to just be there with someone. So after you've said that it's okay to cry, just be there. Just
Yeah.
be there. You don't have to have the perfect words. You don't have to say the perfect words. Um, Being there in silence with someone is often the best thing that you can do. And you can say, I'm here for you. It's important to say sometimes, I don't know what to do.
That's
This
very
is
vulnerable.
Yeah, I see that this is hard for you. I'm just going to be here for you, girl. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to hold you, or you let me know if that's okay. Um, and just keep allowing that person to process their emotion, process their grief, however they need to. And oftentimes, if for a parent to a child, it's
Mhm.
really important for parents to recognize that different children might process things differently, right? So
Okay.
you might have one child that cries a lot and
Mm,
another child that doesn't cry at all, and but then you hear them crying later, in a private
mhm.
space or something like that. So it's always important to acknowledge that, um, if you have multiple kids or two kids,
Mhm.
in your classroom or something like that, that kids are going to process things differently. And that not only is it okay to cry, but it's okay to not cry as well, because some people, that's not how they express their feelings, and that's all right as well. We don't want anyone to feel pressure,
Mhm.
to express their grief in a specific way.
I like that you use that word like pressure. So I think that sometimes we think that there's like a specific way that grief
Mhm.
is supposed to go.
Right.
And I think that kind of starts to give us into like, that I often find like a perfectionist tendency or things should
Mhm.
be this way, especially in parenting. There's a
Mhm.
lot of conversation about like, oh, it should look this way with
Right.
parenting, but like I love that you're saying it's individual for
Absolutely.
each child. It's also individual for each parent or each adult too as
Mhm.
well. So yeah.
Yes, and to highlight that and to model that. So, for me, when our dog passed, Bella
Mhm.
was literally like my first child, and and so I grieved a lot, and there was a lot of crying. And my husband, he didn't cry so much, and that's
Mhm.
okay. And so I would say to my daughters, when they would see me crying, I'm like, "Yes, mommy is crying. I miss
Mhm.
Bella. I'm sad." I explained for them what was happening for me, and then they'd say, "Well, daddy's not crying." Why isn't daddy crying? And I'm like, "That's daddy, that's just he's expressing his grief in different ways." And um in the book, at the end of the book, um I list out some recommendations for
Mhm.
grief activities and coping activities for kids to do, so that in addition to however they want to express their grief, they can try those ways, as well. So, some kids like to color a picture. Some kids do not like to color, right?
Mhm.
Some kids want to take a nature walk and talk about, their happy memories of their pet or happy memories of their loved one that has passed. So recognize that there are just so many different ways to express in a healthy way our
Mhm.
grief, and to talk about that with kids and to start that discussion, is really important. And to start that discussion with a book is
Mhm.
really helpful. And of course, I would love for people to start the discussion with my book, but
Yeah,
but
well, that's what I'm wondering is I'm hearing that maybe this book is not only just for parents and for to be able to do that. I'm hearing having these conversations in schools.
absolutely, absolutely. So the book actually was written, first and foremost for children,
Okay.
but is supposed to be utilized with teachers, school
Yeah.
counselors, psychologists. Uh, it's a wonderful book to have as a resource. So when a child comes into your office, comes into your classroom, comes home from school and says, their friend had an aunt that passed away, or a pet that passed away, or a loved one, that you have something right there to talk about, what grief can look like, right? And that they are not alone in experiencing a loss, right? And as an educator, oftentimes children would come in. They tell you all about what's happening at their home, in their
They
home,
do, they
So
tell you everything.
yes, I knew a lot. So I know that my kids are also taking that into their
Yeah.
classrooms. And so I would have loved, for, their teachers to have had, something right on hand. But because it's such a difficult topic, right?
It
Uh, this is the type of book that I am going to be promoting to school systems, through like the counselor associations, through the um, psychology associations, so that we can make sure that every teacher, every school counselor, every principal has this book right on hand, right? So they
Yeah.
can just pull it out. And the great thing about books and what we call bibliotherapy is
Mhm.
that a child can take the book and read it by themselves,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, if they're of reading age, right? So they
Mhm.
can take the book, process what they're feeling on their own, which for some kids, that's really important, right?
Yep.
To have something where they can kind of do it on their own.
Yep.
And then for other kids, they like to process in a group. So reading the book to a group would also work as well. But it gives you that option, right, to say, hey, I put a book in the reading center that talks about, pet loss. And so if you want to read that book, go ahead. It's available to you whenever. So that's always a nice added resource.
I love that. I mean, I used to work in schools and I worked with kids for a very long time before I moved to working with adults. And that's a big thing for kids. They need those resources, they need that opportunity. Sometimes just to, like you said, just sit and read a book that
Absolutely.
reflects what they're going through. And the other thing I love about it is that it has children of color in it. So our black and brown children, which I don't think people realize the change when
Mhm,
your child opens up a book or opens up or watches media
mhm.
or is even out and about and then they see someone who looks like them. It's
Absolutely.
almost like it gives them that message like, wow, like they've been through that. Like it's like I can connect. And
Right.
so was that something that was intentional for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I, before I had children, knew I wanted to write books with children of color,
Yeah.
and it just so happens that now I have children who are children of color, who are little Black girls,
Yes.
who are hugely underrepresented in children's literature, but specifically also children's literature about grief,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So for them to see themselves in any book is wonderful, right? But
So
then to also see themselves in a book that's talking about feelings and emotions, and that it's okay to have these emotions and to cry and all of those things. A lot of Black women, especially, are not given those messages as children, right? That it's okay to express your feelings, right? And that it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to take a moment, right? And to, as the kids say, be in your feelings, right?
Mhm. And
um,
they do say that now.
they
That's
do,
like a
they do,
I wanna
but
yell
it's
out to my
okay.
feelings.
Yes. So I'll say to my kid, I use her, I'll be like, mommy's in her feelings right now. If they've said something that hurt my feelings, or, so they get it, but it's important for them to have that. And then for my daughters in particular, seeing their actual selves in a book, processing something that up until this point, from my perspective, is the most traumatic thing that's happened to them.
Yeah,
Was really important for them to see that their story is going to be able to help other kids.
yeah.
It's so impactful for them specifically, but then for, like you said, for all Black and brown children, who often don't see themselves in literature, and just seeing the physical characteristics of Black and brown children, like curly hair and and the darker skin, and I was very intentional about that. And working with my illustrator, when I would create a concept for one of the illustrations,
Mhm.
um, oftentimes I'd have to say, "Oh, okay, I need you to, to create more texture with this hair, or
Mhm.
more,
Yeah.
and give her a little bit of guidance with respect to um, how to portray um, people of color, but also
Yeah.
specifically us too." So,
Yep. Yep. I love that. And I love that you have to guide people. And because I think, like, especially if you haven't had that lived experience, it might be a
mhm,
little bit, harder for some people. And so I think this gives an opportunity not only for our Black and brown children, that also gives our people who are not identifying as Black and brown
absolutely.
to be able to look at it and say, wow, like there are other people who experience grief
Mhm,
and, in certain ways, and also to educate their children too, that
absolutely.
there are children who don't look like them, that
Right.
they experience emotions just like, we all
Exactly.
do. So I love that. Well, I also heard that you are doing a series. So are you Gonna
Yes.
keep going?
Yes, so this is the first book of
Yeah.
what will be a series. And so the series will focus on difficult topics, including grief, but also will address positive Black identity development.
Okay.
Will also include anti bullying and race and gender based bullying incidences. And these are all things that my children have experienced. And so the stories are all going to be true stories, just put into a story form for children.
Right.
And because ultimately I've decided, and I think a lot of therapists would agree, that
Everybody
it's
feels happy
best
to know what you're gonna
yeah,
say.
yep. That it's best to take your painful experiences, right, and make them purposeful,
Woo!
right?
Say that again.
So
Say that again.
yes.
Say that again.
Take your pain, make it purposed, right? So these experiences that, and I can imagine you as a mom have experienced this as well, when it's one thing when something that's racially insensitive happens to us, right? That's one thing, right? We have our own processes and we're like, okay. But when you see it happen to your kid, there's something in you that literally is just like comes out.
It's like a fire burning.
Yes,
Like you're
it
like,
is. Like you just
woo!
want to, and you have to hold, because you're just like, oh my gosh. And when you see a child do something or say something or mistreat your child based on what you know is a racial difference or a cultural difference,
Yeah.
there's a different kind of fire, right? That starts to well up in you. And so my way of trying to tame and cope with that fire is to put it into literature form so that other moms, so that Black and brown moms, we can relate. And then my non-Black and brown moms, they can understand much better from the perspective of children,
Yeah.
because they're reading it through my children's eyes, who they typically know, like my friends. So it helps to make very difficult topics more palatable um, for non-Black and brown people, and then just something to resonate with our community as well.
I love that, turning your pain into
Mhm.
purpose. And I think, if we all did our part in that,
Yes,
and of course we have to identify what, like you said, what your pain is and
exactly.
really notice it, especially for therapists, for
Mhm.
clinicians. I think that's sometimes hard because we are in our mode of like, we're in the helping
Right.
profession. We're very trained to
Hmm.
focus on that. And it's sometimes we're not trained to go into our personal lives
Right.
and then kind of move that into purposeful action. But that is advocacy.
Mhm.
That is a way that we can spread our message more because we learn a lot in school. And so it's an opportunity for us to take what we've learned, like you said, add in our pain and what we've
Right.
experienced and make it purposeful action for the world that we live in. So I love
Absolutely.
that. I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I could have this conversation forever and ever and ever with you. I love it. I love your energy. I do want to kind of close with, what do you do for your
Mhm.
wellness
Oh,
every day? How do you kind of stay focused as a mom, as a licensed psychologist, as a children's book author, as a children's yoga instructor? I mean, you are checking off the boxes. So what do you do for your wellness, to keep
right.
you kind of going through your purpose?
Right. Well, all of the aspects of my life, I try to make sure that within every aspect, there is something in there that does make me feel more balanced,
Mhm,
right? So with like teaching children's yoga, I love it. It's literally physical balance, right?
mhm,
Combined with emotional balance and breathing and meditation, like we did at the beginning of this chat. And
mhm,
just it, well, yoga in and of itself is that, combination of, mental health, physical health, spiritual health. It just combines all of those things. And so everything I do, I try to make sure that there's a piece of that that is speaking to my overall balance. So with yoga, I get that
Mhm.
physical, emotional, spiritual connection. With my work with clients, I get to, help others, which is really the core of what I do and who I am.
Mhm.
Want to make sure that every aspect is helping others. Even when I do like dance sessions for my community, it's
Mhm.
just when you're dancing, it's really hard to be unhappy
Yeah, it's
when you're
true. When the
dancing.
music
And
comes
so
on, you're like, you just like, I forgot about my sadness right now.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's why I know when I was grieving for Bella, I had stopped dancing because I was so sad, right? But I recognized in that sadness, I knew that I would get through it, that I was going through it, right? And
Mhm.
that I honored my sadness. I'm like, I know I'm sad.
Yep.
It sucks, right?
Yep.
But I'm walking through it, and we know you have to walk through it. And grief is that um uh, that emotion that you will always have it with you because whether it's a significant loss, right,
Mhm.
or even what we'd consider like a minor loss,
Mhm.
it's still impactful, and whoever that person was or that animal or whatever it was, a relationship, it's still going to be with you. And so honor your feelings for what the loss was,
Right.
but just keep moving, honor it, but keep moving through it.
Yeah.
And so yes, in all of my different activities and career
Mhm.
goals, I try to make sure that I'm keeping and maintaining within that some sort of balance piece. And so writing this book again was hugely therapeutic for me,
Yeah.
and also for my children. So it kind of checked that box,
Mhm.
and then I get to
Yeah.
share it with everyone and continue the series. And I'm hoping to move fully into the author space
Mhm.
for my career, and probably will continue seeing clients,
Yeah. Yep.
but this is definitely a passion point that I want to pursue more fully as I progress in producing more of the series.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, keep going, because I'm looking forward to it. So this is the book.
oh yeah, you
Yes,
have it.
yes,
Yes.
I have it. Full disclosure, we have not read to my child
Oh,
yet.
so yes,
And the only reason why, so I'll tell you a little story. We'll see if we cut this out or not.
yes,
But I was like, oh, I have like an interview this week about a
yes.
book, and I bought this book. And my husband was like, well, what's the book about? And I was like, well, it's about, two girls, they lost their dog, and maybe I'll read
Hmm.
it to my daughter. And he
Right.
was like, I think you need to hold off on that
like
one. And I was like, why? I was like, we can just get ready and he was like, yeah, like I don't really think we should be doing that yet. So I was like, it actually, we didn't have this conversation, but I think
Mhm.
it'd be interesting. It's like, is this book like in prep?
I
Is this in like post grief?
right.
Because I think that's a very interesting conversation
It really is.
about like when you deliver the book.
Absolutely. So, first off, I believe in prep for everything. so,
No, I'm the same
so
way.
yeah. So it's good to have the book, right? Just ready for when and if, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, because the reality is if you love someone, if you love something, at some point you're going to grieve, right? Because and I know all the beautiful quotes on grief because I consumed them all when I was in my process. Um, but that grief is the evidence of love is a huge one for me. And so you're going to grieve at some point in your life. So just have the book.
Yeah.
It's up to parents, of course, to parents and to teachers and to psychologists, as to when to read the book, right? Or when is it
Mhm.
appropriate, right? So that is, of course, up to individual families and your knowledge of your child. But for sure, if they lose a pet, it's completely appropriate, for all ages, all of those things. But what I love about the book as well is it leaves the door open for a parent to insert what they believe about what happens after,
Mhm.
right? so
Mhm.
so you get to have that discussion if you want to or not, right? About what mommy believes happens after, right? So
Yeah.
I have told my girls, mommy believes that Bella is in dog heaven and
Yeah.
she's with all the other dogs and all the other pets that have
Mhm.
passed on, and they know my pets from my childhood, right? So they'll talk about Bella being with Stato, my cat, when
Mm.
I grew up, and they're just frolicking up there. So that's what we believe.
Yeah.
And I always add the piece of other families may believe something different.
Yeah. Yep. I
That's
love
okay. And that's okay. But this is what we believe, or this is what mommy believes. And I'll check in with them because I don't make the assumption that what I believe is what my child believes. I will
Mhm.
ask them, well, what do you believe? Where do you believe Bella is? And my oldest daughter said that she believes that Bella has become like other animals that we see, so she'll see a deer and say, oh my gosh, I think that's Bella. And I'm like, that is beautiful. And let's wave to Bella. So,
Yeah.
so I allow my children to explore their beliefs through hearing what we believe as a family. And it's really important to have these kinds of conversations. And it may not be, um, best maybe right when something happens,
Yeah.
right? But maybe when something happens to a friend, um,
Mhm.
that can be an opportune moment, right? So that you can say, okay, well, this might be something that your friend is experiencing. So let's, maybe read the book and see if maybe providing the book for your friend would be helpful.
Mhm.
Oftentimes we don't know the correct words, or we're looking for the perfect words to say to someone when they lose a pet, when they um, lose a loved one. So a gift of a book, and maybe this book would be appropriate, maybe another book, is super helpful because it's letting them know, hey, I care. um, I don't know exactly what to say, but here's what another person's experience with that is. And it's just really important to talk about these difficult topics, and grief in particular, because oftentimes pet loss is a child's first experience with grief.
Yeah.
And
You're
so
That is
that's
true.
why we kind of start there, because um, it's a frequent place where children learn about grief and how they're going to be processing grief. And it lays the foundation for the rest of their life, right? When they do lose, potentially a grandparent, or, a family member, so that they have that understanding of what they did, right? So in the book,
Mhm.
Zandy and Ellis, and we did it here in our house. We have a little like memorial table for Bella in our office, and has her picture, and they get to put all their favorite pictures of Bella, and they'll swap them
Yeah.
out. They'll like go through, because we have like a box of just pictures. And then her collar, her actual ashes are there. We
Yeah.
talked about that. So it's all there for them, and it's in the office, so they can go and have their quiet time with Bella if they
Mhm.
want to. They know she's there in terms of a place to honor her.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just really important to highlight what we can do and what other families do, what we would like to do. But for a child who hasn't experienced, any type of loss, right? So,
Mhm.
like for your child,
Mhm.
yeah, probably maybe not the best like bedtime book, right?
Yes. Well, I love that. What it is so it sits on it's been sitting on my desk in my
Yes.
area. one of the things that she loves is because it looks like her. Like, so
Yes.
she's like, oh, they have a little doggy too. And then
Yes.
she's just like, so we're not reading it, but so as I said, the other layer of it is that she's seeing.
Seeing
So
herself.
she is
Absolutely.
seeing herself with her dog, which our dog is very similar to this.
Oh, that is so
And
amazing.
so our dog Bailey, and my daughter's curly hair and loves
Yes.
wearing her curly hair. And so that is the power of it. It's like, and I love how you said it's on hand.
Exactly.
So being able to just have it there.
Absolutely.
So that's what I would tell anybody, just buy it.
Yes.
Just the fact that
have it.
like, it's sitting there, and then your child's like, "Oh, like that's
Right.
cute. I like that." And they may not, like I said, they may not read it, but they're just like, "Oh, look at these pictures. Oh, that's so
Absolutely.
cute with their doggy. Oh, they're having fun."
Right.
Like,
And
and
if they,
that's great.
and if they ask, and if a parent, and I encourage parents to always read books before giving them to your children, right? So read the book first. And then if, say, your child asks you, your daughter asks, like, oh, can we read it? And you're not, ready for her to read it. You can say something like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you want to read this book. And we're gonna hold it. And when I think you're ready, we're going to read it. Okay. Like, so let your child know that, it's there. If they see it, they're going to, be like, and just let them know you will read it, at some point, just not right then, so that they know that it's coming. But it's a great book visually in terms of seeing themselves, that representation matters. Yes. I worked with the illustrator very specifically to make sure that we were represented.
Yes. And I think, Joe, like you said, for not only for have it on hand within your home, have it also on hand for therapists, have it on hand in schools. So if you're that school counselor, I have been there before where you're like, I need something on hand to like give this child while I got to finish my paperwork. I got to do all that. It's a perfect book for that. So please go buy it. It's on Amazon. I just point click and it came to my house.
I know. It's like 2 days. Yeah.
So please do it. So thank you so much for coming on, sharing. You gave so many tips. I was writing down. I'm like, I'm a therapist. I'm still writing down. I was like, what do I need to do? So thank you so much. And again, please go on Amazon, purchase this book, have it on hand in your home, in your school, in your therapist's office. It is so important that we have these conversations with our kids and even for yourself too, as well. So yeah. Yes. Well, thank you for joining us, Dr. Monica Page. And